Okay, so when last we left off, in the exciting saga of Sunshine's sister, I had typed you ISTJ, and you had said, no, you think you're ENFP. Is that correct?
Yeah, and I did like some reflection because I looked at the comments and I looked at a conversation you had with I think a woman named Amy. That's an ESFP.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm more open to that, but with ISTJ it was so out of nowhere that it just made me laugh because I was like, I would live as an imposter if I actually am an ISTJ because I feel like I
Okay.
live smarter than that.
Okay, well, last time I talked to you, you had thought you were an ENFP. Do you no longer think that?
The thing is, when I looked more into ESFPs, I saw a lot of similarities. And I mean, I behave the same way, like that won't change. I'm me, right? But um, this like the stack of ESFP, like the functions, that maybe makes more sense in a way than ENFP. I also talked to some friends and they kind of like agreed that I'm not like a stereotypical ENFP in that sense.
Okay, so the thing is, when we call somebody a given type, what we're saying is they've they're operating under configuration of 16 possible configurations. So
Yeah.
it you're not you're not a dominant extroverted intuitor. So we can eliminate ENFP. As far as I was able to test last time, and from everything I can tell, you're definitely not that, and that's a pretty definitive thing that we can be pretty definitive because it's so testable. After all, it's creative, putting shit out there on the fly. So it's easy to say,
Mm.
can you demonstrate this or not? And some people can, some people can. It depends on their function stack, right? So the the SEDOM notion. Okay, well, if you're asserting that you're TI polar in either instance, so we should be able to either confirm or eliminate that without any difficulty. So let's ask some more TI questions. Okay. Today is Sunday.
Mm.
Can you tell me tomorrow's yesterday?
Still Sunday.
Okay. How about if if all x's are y and and if all x's are y and I am x, am I necessarily y?
Yeah.
Okay. Who is my mother's sister's sister's only child in relation to me?
You.
Yeah, you're not TI polar.
The thing is, okay, I mean, I don't want to fight you about this because I'm very open to like what you say, what you like see me doing. Um, and I realize that I'm maybe not that bad at these questions, but when I go through life, I usually don't use like a single logical thought. I am very like emotionally based.
Well, sure, because it's not a conscious function and it's countervalued. Okay, it's in the sixth slot. You don't like it. Not
Mm-hmm.
liking to be logical and choosing and spending most of your attention in other areas is not the same
Mm-hmm.
thing as being blind to logic. In fact, you're quite aware of it.
Mm.
You
Then
even
I have just one question because obviously then I would have TE as my second, and then probably third FI. What would be the difference between like having FI second or third as I go through life? Because that's what confused me because I'm like everything I do is based on my feelings. So where's the difference in the
okay.
stack?
Well, everything I do is because I like to get attention.
And
and
that's your third.
that's my third. That's FE. It's an absolute value.
Mm.
So
And
yeah,
how would the second like if
the second function plays out as the thing you can kill it at, but it's not really. It's not for you don't get a whole lot of gratification from it for its own sake. So it's like my TI, I can kill it. I can do all the logic stuff or whatever, but it's necessary for me to be seen as competent enough that people pay attention to me rather than in itself. When I can get people to pay attention to me with jokes and music, I'm probably happier doing that.
Mhm. Then now I'm more interested in why you thought I'm an ISTJ. Could you like test me more on that? Because that is something I never ever considered, and I also feel like I don't know a single person that's an ISTJ.
I think you're an ISTJ because you tested out as fourth slot extroverted intuition. Your TI is strong, but your FI front stack. It's clear that what I call the scorecard function, which is the thing that makes us feel like we're winning or losing in life, which is our third slot function, is very much doing its thing in you. It's dictating this is what's important and this is what we're going to attain at. And then
Mm.
your dominant function, being SI, is keeping track of all of your experiences and what you also plan to impact. So the SISE 1-5 thing, it's like when we think about SE, it's really about turning what and it starts turning an idea into a reality. It's about impacts and concretization. So for you, that's autopilot. The process of turning your ideas into reality is autopilot. You just follow through and do the things usually that you plan to do, and you're not likely to. I guess I'd say be. You're not likely to have problems with knowing what to do and then doing it.
Then I have one more question. Because obviously my brother and I, we always assume that I'm an ENFP. Also, just in relation to how like my relationships with my brother and also my other family
I
members.
don't think your brother thought you were an ENFP.
Mhm.
I don't think your brother thought you were an ENFP. I doubt your brothers thought you were an ENFP for a long time, if ever. He just didn't tell you that he didn't think you were an ENFP. That's my guess.
I don't know, because actually I talked a lot with him and he kind of like, he wanted me to like explain to you all the reasons why we think I'm an ENFP. Um, and the thing, I believe that we got my behaviors right, but we kind of like just had the wrong functions to describe it. Because my relationship with INFJs is usually pretty great. So I don't know what that like thought process was. But anyways, my question
How
is
many
more like
INFJs do you know?
I had like a best friend in school that was an INFJ. So
Okay.
I never had issues with them. I don't know. I guess I feel like I'm very adaptable when it comes to like different personalities.
Okay. So, do you feel like you spend a lot of time adapting to different like what does that mean exactly?
Adapting is in I'm I don't know. I guess I'm like very open to people being different than me. I don't really expect like to relate on every single level. For example, now like my best friends are like ISTP, INTP, and ENTP, and I'm always like confused why we like each other.
Well, I mean, one of my best real life friends is an ISTJ. I'm an ENTP, and
Like I like skipped through a video with him, and I was wondering like, how actually is your relationship with him? Because with my ENTP friend, we often have to like talk through things when we don't see eye to eye. Because she likes to debate and I get sensitive because I don't want to like explain myself when I believe
I don't
something.
try to debate Cameron.
Okay. Because how would he react?
I'm a better ENTP than most younger ENTPs in the sense that I I don't like to debate people. I'm also it's like when it's your job, you know. It's like
Mm,
it's good. Why you don't want to be a gynecologist when it's your job, then you don't want to have it at home, really.
mm,
Anyway, yeah, I don't. I never debate Cameron about anything because we only ever do things together. You might have your ENT. You might have all these people typed wrong too. There's no reason to think you've typed any of these
yeah,
people
true.
correctly. You know.
That's true. I mean, the only thing, like, I'm not like sad on her being an ENTP, but she came out saying that she's an ENFP, and I found that very funny because I was like, well, I feel like ENFPs are not that argumentative in real life. But she's also like, she also was in like a debate class, so maybe she is another type, but just great at debating. Who knows?
I mean, who knows if she's even good at debating? Just because she likes to do it doesn't mean she's good at it. That's the other thing is I don't necessarily want to debate people. It's just that people say wrong things, so then I have to explain why they're wrong. It's like just like what just happened here. I'm not trying to debate you. I'm just saying, okay, but I mean, just because this friend is argumentative doesn't mean that they are good at arguing. And anyway, and even if you are an ENTP, it doesn't mean you're good at arguing. I've
Mm,
encountered ENTPs who, well, a lot of times they'll come in and try to argue with me for a little bit until they realize they're outmatched, and you know, it
mm,
takes training besides just if you're talking about in some sense the best natural debaters are probably well, I guess it probably is ENTP, but it really depends on where they direct their energies. You know, there's a particularist element to it. When you say that you are adaptable to other personality types, it is the case that an ISTJ or an ISFJ or anybody with SI in the one or two is going to fundamentally get that other people have their own experience that's distinct from yours. You know,
mm,
because they're particularist knowers, whereas the people who least get that are like ENFJs and ENTJs, who are
mm,
um, who have SI polar. They don't get that other people really have their own experience, and then that matters a lot. You know, so like an
mm,
ENFJ or an ENTJ won't put much weight into the fact that the mask wearing like having to wear a mask bothers you or something, whereas an SI down gets that it's like the the physical the physical experience, physical comfort of somebody is important.
mm. So would you say as an ISTJ, mm, like usually they have great relationships with like ISFJs and ESFJs? Or can you not make that claim? Because obviously like people,
Yeah, it
so
really
like,
depends. It look the thing is about life, we we have two factors. One is the intertype relationship, and
mm,
the other is our particularist deviations from that, and then our particularist relational things. So it's
mm,
like people who have history and are both SI, they're going to find ways to bond because they already have weighted that history as significant. It's like, okay, well you got history with me, so you're special. Is an SI inherent bias? Okay, if the more time and energy and stories that involve you in my past, the more you grow in significance, and you know, so that's sort of implicit to SI that we're creating our own story, our own book as we're moving through our life, compiling these experiences with various parties. So
mm,
on that ground, you know, SI people are able to always if you have somewhat your relationships in your life are going to be defined by who you grew up around and the geographical stuff. And then if you have both parties being healthy, well-adjusted individuals of their type, then they're going to want to find ways to, engage healthily together rather than unhealthily. Now, when you add in the NI types, they're, they all, everybody in the world goes through life generally attempting to not have problems with people unless they're really angry.
Mm. Mm. I guess like when you last made like in the last video when you made the comment of ISTJ, I was very surprised, which is why I like reacted the way I did. But when I looked back at the video and you said that like um my intuition functions are like fourth and eighth, right? That was funny to me because I feel like that is where I go to my brother for.
Hmm.
Just for like because I asked him stuff from like my like experiences and then he puts that into like another frame. And I'm like, oh, okay. Don't have to do that myself.
Yeah, well, I guess the equivalent relationship would be me and my ESTP daughter,
Mm.
because, but she is pretty good about impact stuff. SE is a weird function, It's I think that to understand it correctly, we have to stop thinking that doing exercises or stuff like let's say I was to go hiking with Rachel today. People would say, "Oh, well, that's good. You've really done some SE stuff." It's not necessarily that SE, because real SE is about creating some kind of an impact. So it's more SE to go out and buy something than it is to take a hike, because buying something creates an actual impact in your life.
Mm. Fun. Is it like, I mean, I guess it's very common for people to like mistype themselves, but
Especially SI DOMs.
how come?
Well, because SI DOMs have in front of them or in their brain this wide archive of uh, specific experiences. Okay, and each of those specific experiences they can match up to different things like this. They're doing it backwards, but that's how they're doing it. So as a consequence, they can always find, if they read a type description that they like the sound of, or whatever, they
Uh,
can find examples from their life that match up with things in that type description.
I mean, I'll be honest, like not to like shade any ENFPs, but even like all the time that I thought I was one, I didn't like any other ENFPs. Because well, I'm like this special butterfly. I'm not like them.
Well, according to Eric's uh, matchup mate matrix, Socionics has duality right only for the judgers, and for the perceivers, you should be with the other perceiving equivalency. So for you, that would mean you should get with ESFP, and that's probably when you say you identify kind of with ESFP. There's a commonality there that's equivalent to the commonality between ENTP and INFJ. It may not be immediately obvious because one is so socially deft and the other is rather a socially bumpy road for ENTP, whereas INFJ are very socially deft. But beyond that, there's a commonality of recognizing that currency and operating in that currency. So the equivalent relationship for ISTJ is ESFP.
That actually surprised me, and that was kind of why I didn't want to accept it, because I usually like stay clear of extroverts. But that just might be like, I don't know, personal bias. Who knows?
Okay. Well, it I feel pretty confident about the typing, but if I were to be
Because you
wrong,
actually
if I were
were
to be
like
if I were to
in
be
someone.
wrong, I would say
Mm.
ESTJ for you might be a possibility. But I
I
think
want to see
you're ISTJ.
ESTJ. That would be weird. ESTJ with like FI as the fourth.
Yeah, I mean you don't talk about your feelings like that. At least you don't self-report about them. But self-reporting is not particularly reliable, and I can't really test FI directly because it's just so.
Yeah. I get too much shit from my family about FI because they all use FE. So I just don't bring it up.
Yeah, I mean that sounds more, I guess, third than fourth because fourth slot FI and ESTJs is pretty dismissive of feelings usually. You don't seem like an ESTJ to me.
You mean like dismissive of like one's own feeling?
And in general of feelings, yes.
Oh no.
They're much harsher than ISTJs.
Yeah, no. I don't know. I'm a bit more considerate. Like not that much, because I guess like FE isn't like something that I use a lot. But I still have this like as IFI. I'm like, well, they have like their own experience.
Yeah.
And maybe they, have also their own feelings that I should consider.
Yeah. Well, and that's actually the commonality between ISTJ and ENTP, where there's common ground is we both ultimately value Fs as an absolute value. So
Hmm.
um, we're and we and um, we're different in the perceiving in that I value the N's, ISTJ values the S's. So that would make it challenging to be in like a long term relationship with one. But there's common ground because they both get what really matters are is at the end of the day, in both of our scorecard and our blind but absolute valued functions, we get that what matters is our feelings and everybody else's. So it's just a matter of which one is conscious and which one is blind is the difference. Regardless, we're not likely to fail on each other's metrics in that regard too badly.
Hmm. I can already like just listening to you and like the way you, I guess, perceive things is very different to me. Because I feel myself quickly zoning out. Because I'm like, well, there's nothing concrete really that you say. There's like, I guess like concepts, and I'm like, well, what would that be like in like personal experience?
Yeah. Well, I mean, it is a good idea. I think it's the best way to talk about functions is to talk about in the abstract a little bit like that, and then concretize what you're saying with an example. So when I can do that, I try to do that. But sometimes certain concepts are what you might call architectural. They're about the architecture, not about anybody's experience.
I mean, that makes sense. It's not like anyone's fault if other people then don't get it because they don't like to think of it that way, you know?
And this is an example of sixth slot TI. You you will use it and be good at it when called upon to. When the world calls upon you to use it and
Mm.
demonstrate capacity with it, you'll do so. But you don't like it and it's not interesting to you to do that
Yeah.
process.
Mm. I guess it's also made like explains very well why I pretty much don't have any friends in like the psychology field. Because it's like this might also just be like a stereotype, but I feel like it's a lot of like ENFPs. At least like
There are a lot of ENFPs in
yeah.
psychology. That's true.
And whenever I like meet them, I'm like, oh, this is actually the like typical representation of like this weird fairy that's like living in the imaginative world. I don't know.
Well, I gotta say this. I gotta give them some credit though, because the my at the end of my second marriage, my wife and I went to a like marriage counselor thing, basically to help us navigate our divorce that we both kind of knew was coming, you know. And he did a pretty damn good job. I was very impressed. I needed somebody in there who could advocate on behalf of Candace because, you know, it's hard to find a psychologist or whatever they can handle having me as one of the two people and and not end up being swayed by me.
Oh, because you have good arguments or what?
Because I'm right. Because my partner is in the wrong. Anytime there's a disagreement, my partner's always in the wrong. I don't start disagreements. I'm very other serving in the relationship because I'm FE third.
Hmm.
Like I don't expect Rachel. I don't expect anything from Rachel, and I still expect her to um, expect expect stuff from me and get mad at me if I don't deliver.
Oh, wow. So it's like a constant thing in the
It,
back of your mind.
yeah, that FE third. The downside of FE third is that you basically think you have no inherent value except to the extent that you're useful to other people. If you think about it willfully or consciously. Unconsciously, though, your FI is a baby, and it's leading you by the hand all the time. So you never know what you want, you never know what you're going to do, and you're always looking around to other people for cues as to what you should do. But then you don't want to be told what to do because you're eighth slot SC. It's a fucking nightmare.
Mhm. That's a rough mix. I guess what I like about my friends is that they're all like a bit emotionally stunted. Kind of like it. Because like in my family everyone's so like over involved with like FE in a way that it's always about like, accommodating everyone.
Right.
And I
Well,
don't like that. I want people to be like authentic in the sense that, it's not like too important what the group like wants.
well, to quote Frank James, this is the best thing I ever heard Frank James say, which is about INFJs. Their basic MO is is everybody else enjoying playing this game that's killing my soul? Yes? Okay, let's keep playing.
Yeah, I cannot relate. When my brother always teases me because he always like says I'm not a team player. Because he comes to me and he's like, "Can we maybe go like for a walk?" And I'm like, "Well, no, I don't feel like it." And he's like, "Okay, fuck you." And then he's like, why wouldn't you just do it?
That's the best way to describe the value of FE. It's better than harmony is being a team player. Being a team player
Yeah,
is not necessarily harmonious. It's being a team player rather than an individual player. Of course, you got to know who your team is then. But the
true.
the thing is, if you're FE, you're basically assuming let's all try to be team players and be cooperative with each other and facilitatory. But of course, if we to have that frame, you have to not really and clearly know what you want because what you want, if then is like okay, are others accommodating me or am I accommodating them? Well, it's supposed to be reciprocal, but the fact is somebody's got to actually want something.
Yeah, I guess that's why like I would assume that if like many FE people come together, they're all very indecisive, aren't they?
Well, I
Just like
mean, it's kind of like where do you want to eat? I don't know. Where do you want to eat? I don't know. Where do
yeah.
you want to eat?
See, stuff like that I really like about cognitive functions because I watched a lot of your content in the last few weeks. And in one of them, you kind of like described like the schools of psychology, and then you were like, well, cognitive functions are like the all-encompassing one that actually describes human nature the best.
Yeah, it
And
describes reality itself because
yeah,
there are no other realities other than those manifest by individuals.
yeah, that's so true. And I get excited about the thought of like trying to like incorporate that into therapy. And my friends are funny because they're like, well, would you be interested in doing research? And I'm like, well, I'd rather like other people do the research and I can just like use that research and actually be effective with it.
I mean, it's what psychology needs is people like you to pick up what I'm saying and apply it. And so you're a hero.
Thank you. I mean, I will try to do my best to like do that actually. Because
Yeah.
also, because also whatever we learn in like psychology, I always feel like underneath that it's just that people, like you always say, they live in their own frame and they put that on other people, and then they have conflict.
Yeah, and then they don't understand. They don't have a map for frames to explain to them
Mm,
to say, okay, here's what it means to be, talking in this frame of reference, and it links to this cognitive, these kind of
mm,
attentional configuration things, and then, but it is now like the way we're doing it here, it's links clearly enough to skills that are more or less ungameable that you can really start to do things with it.
mm,
Because the linkage, like between the idea that there is an intentional manner called SI that recalls a bunch of detailed experiences, and that you can go range from dominant to blind, has been indisputably proven
mm,
by myriad typing sessions at this point on this channel. I've asked enough SI questions and typed enough different people that the difference between front stack SI and back stack SI is pretty black and white, pretty clear cut. And it's such a stark epistemological distinction, and it makes a huge difference in understanding why people are different from one another just by itself. And that's just one function distinction, the knowledge functions. That makes a huge difference right there.
that's so true. I mean, like, how much time do you have? Because I would like to keep talking, but I don't want to like be too selfish with your time.
Let's keep going for a while. If you got questions or anything, I'd be happy to answer them. Or yeah, let's keep chatting. I'm not in any huge hurry. Let's aim for. We got another half an hour or so.
Yeah,
Aim for 11. Cool.
that's nice. Because I was also wondering, like, that was like the biggest reason why I didn't want to accept that I'm an ISTJ. Because like I looked, like immediately I looked up like what would be like the perfect like counterpart to it. And like you said, I think it was like ESFP or ECP. Um, and I'm like so opposed to thinking that for me, like an extrovert, not even extrovert, because I know it's not like MBTI typical extrovert, but just like an ESTP, I guess, would be the perfect mix. Like, how would that actually like play out in a like in a friendship relationship, whatever, with the function?
I mean, ESFP is kind of the perfect relationship for ISTJ because ESTP has the flip autopilot thing. Your fifth slot function is how you validate others in the world to some extent. So it's like if you're going to respect somebody, they have to attain at least this much on SE. If an ESFP is going to respect somebody, that person has to attain at least this much on SI. And so the 1-5 flip is significant in that it guarantees that you respect your partner because they're accomplishing on your fifth slot. Now, the second thing is ESFPs know what they want as well, but they get that there's an economy of wants, I guess, that in order to get what they want, they're going to have to pay something, sacrifice something. Whereas in the third slot, it's a little more selfish than that. You want what you want without having to, you know, it's even more selfish than second slot. So it's a weird function to call selfish because FI is not exactly selfish. It could be you can do incredibly unselfish things for FI reasons if somebody you find precious. But the thing is, they're unselfish for that other person, not for everybody in general.
I was actually explaining that to a friend yesterday that I was trying to ask her about her like use of FE. Um, And then I just said, like, I realized for myself that even if I do something for other people, it's just my extension of FI. It's still about me feeling good.
Yeah, you're never gonna have a thing where you do something and you go, the purpose of this is now I have to tell everybody that I did it.
Yeah, no.
Whereas
I'm very secretive
that's why I do
FI.
things at all, is to tell people that I did them. That's the only reason to do anything.
To like get out the like, how do you say?
So I can
Like the
make up a story about it, or basically tell a story about whatever it is I'm doing, so that other people can go, yeah, that's cool. You're cool, Eric. You're funny, or you're worth something, or whatever. It's a terrible function to have as your third slot function in some sense. It means you're like always like, hey, look at me. Hey, look at me, everybody. I'm over here doing stuff. Hey, look at me. It's really fucking dorky.
is I guess it's very dependent on other people because I go through life very independent. I don't. I always go with the frame like I don't care what anyone else does or thinks, so I like expect the same. But then people always worry about like, oh, other people.
And this is one of those things where self-reporting is not very reliable, because if you were to ask me, or most ENTPs in fact, whether they're impacted a great deal by other people's perceptions of them, they would likely say no, and I would say no, but that would not be a reliable answer, because I'm so fundamentally sculpted by others' perceptions of me that
Hmm.
most of that I'm not even counting in my calculus, right? It's like underneath the the I have to note an instance where I'm especially trying to make an effort for me to think of that as being an instance of that, even though as a sort of default I'm doing it all the time.
Yeah, so you don't like contemplate it too much because it's so natural.
Right. And part of the way that the reason I can both be FE third, which is selfish and wants to get prizes in that area, but also apparently not very good at it, is because I'm prioritizing only the long term and big picture FE stuff most of the time, unless I'm doing humor. So I don't really care whether right now I'm making a good impression or not, if I'm
Mm.
right, because long term it doesn't matter if I I got a little yelly last night, because what I'm saying is true, correct, just, and I will be validated by history. And therefore on the big picture FE level, I don't care about the fact that I could have been nicer last night or whatever. But sometimes I do. If I feel bad, if I feel like if I get mean or something, then eventually my
Mm.
FI kicks in, I guess, and I feel guilty, and then I go, oh, I guess I was mean.
Mm. Really, that's interesting. Mm. And then coming back to like SISE, because you also said that a lot of people like misunderstand SE. So for me, it's also tricky because that's why I like never thought it's like higher my stack because I just didn't understand what SI and SE is. So SE is about like making an impact. So you do something, but obviously it has to like have a bigger meaning in the long run.
For you, yeah. The point
Yeah,
is,
like
you you know what you want to do, and you do it, and let's say it requires some consistency over time. That's not going to be a problem for you. Usually, you're going to be able to pilot that. When extroverted sensing is ignored by you in ways that are notable, it's going to be when you miss an opportunity. So you see something, you could have grabbed it, but you didn't. Because that kind of SE disrupts the continuation of the status quo, which is SI.
I actually had that for the first time a few months ago, and that was like one of the most painful experiences this year. And it's funny now to like put it into words, as in like that was like a missed opportunity for like SESI.
Yeah, well, I mean, it's it. We will notice occasionally when our fifth slot fails us in key moments, but by and large, it doesn't fail us too much.
Yeah.
We can count. We can both ignore it and count on it.
And then how does SI work? Because what like from the videos that I watched from you, it was a lot about like you remember the past, but you also consider the future.
You see the future as a continuation of the past in progress. The extent to which you see the future as a continuation of the past in progress is the extent to which you are attending by introverted sensing. So, like, I see the future structurally as a continuation of the past, but I don't keep very good track of what I'm doing. So it doesn't end up actually playing out like that. It's not like, okay, so right now there's this song that's been driving me fucking crazy. I've been trying to write this song that is just I'm about ready to just pull my beard out of my face because it's so frustrating, this thing I'm working on. Anyway, that's small picture enough that I put enough time into it that at some point I'm confident this thing I will in the next couple of days I will finish it. Okay,
Mm.
this is just the compositional part. But anyway, um, but there's all sorts of things that I start to do that I never finish. Anytime I start to do one of those things, presumably I'm anticipating a future in which it's finished.
Mhm.
But I'm wrong. Now, that's because being an extroverted intuitor means I have many more ideas than I can possibly turn into realities. And and the 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 opposite is you more or less. You've got not a whole lot of new ideas because you're keeping track of all of the existing realities and their continuation thereof.
So if I would start a project, I would be very like I would be more mindful about
Yes.
how I would have to handle it for in the future that being done.
And you'd have some awareness of how much of a time commitment it's going to be and how much it's going to impact your schedule and your routine and other things that you currently got going on.
So it's also about time management, I guess.
Yeah, well, from that's how you view it. Yeah, probably as time management, um, because you understand that time has to be managed. I don't seem to
No,
understand that.
I was just like putting that word out there because the friend that I'm like contemplating her being an ENTP, I had many discussions to see what kind of functions she like has like where in her stack, and she kind of said like um yeah she has like issues with like time management because she had doesn't really have a feel for how anything like will actually play out in the future. So even if she has, for example, I don't know, that might be like I would actually like to hear your take on this. She's like constantly late, even if she has like 3 hours to get ready, because she doesn't have a feel for how much time anything will take her. Can you relate to that? Or...
Well, I'm not late, but uh, but it is the case that like okay, the other day I had to go. We got to go to this YouTube party thing, right? And so I got up at like early-ish. I had like 3 or 4 hours before I had to leave, and then I said to myself, okay, well, I got to make sure I take a bath and put on some clean clothes and get ready. So I'll start doing that pretty soon. And then I started doing something. I don't even remember what it was, but and then it's like, oh shit, it's already 12 o'clock, and I've got to now. I've just got to. I don't have time to take a bath. Just got to put on an extra deodorant and like wipe my face with a paper towel or something, and then um, and change clothes and just go because I don't even have time. And that's but it wasn't because when I started working on that thing, whatever it was, that I thought I'm gonna finish it before I leave. It was just I just got caught up in it.
Hmm. That I think like the way you phrase it, as in like you get caught up in something, I don't relate to that. I rarely do that. I'm very aware of like how much time things take.
Yeah, that's why you have a much better function stack than me in any objectively measurable way. It makes more sense to live like to live as a human being. It does not make good sense to be my function stack.
Yeah, society doesn't really support that too much.
It's unfortunate. It's like society is not as fair as typology. Typology says in order to have a given skill, you have to have a given deficit. And
Yeah.
society says we only care about some skills and some deficits. And depending on which one you have, you're either A-OK or fucked.
Yeah, that's very true.
It's just the injustice of utility, ultimately. It's like because
Mm.
people have wants and needs, and because other people can be more or less useful, you inherently have a bias towards provision of utility in terms of what gets publicly validated or externally validated because
Mm.
while the individual and their particular feelings and experiences are going to get validated in like media and stuff, it's only going to be to the extent that they resonate with other people in ways that they want and universally as much as universally as possible if it's going to get a lot of consumption. So it's like when something gets too sad, I turn it off. That
Mm.
so it's like there's a fairly limited spectrum of human experience that's going to be expressed by people as media to consume. That's gonna be constrained by FV stuff and other people's FI.
I was also wondering about that. You mentioned that you didn't like watching certain entertainment. And I think that related to like where you have your FE and FI. Do you remember that?
I mean, I don't remember what I was talking about, but I have an
I
instance
think it was,
from yesterday. I was watching this show about suicide and had this bullying section, and it's a Korean drama, and I just couldn't watch it. I just turned it off. It's depressing.
I probably know do you mean Tomorrow,
Yeah.
the show? Yeah, I've watched that. It was actually funny. They had an episode about a dog being depressed and wanting to commit suicide. Actually, like I remember the instance. You explained to someone that you didn't like what you liked watching like failed videos. Like something happened, but they almost almost something happened, but they actually came out of it.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah. I don't like to see people get hurt. Say again.
They You don't like it when it takes like a dark turn as in like, well, they all died or something happened.
Yeah,
Actually then.
right, exactly. Yeah, I don't want to, and I don't like to see people fall down and hurt themselves. Like, yeah, it. I don't want to. I don't think it's funny to see somebody fall on their face. I think it's funny, maybe, or interesting to see them like almost fall on their face, but pull a ninja move and like avoid it with,
Oh.
like that kind of shit. Or I like clips videos if they're cool, interesting, authentic clips of something happening that but I don't want it if it has animals getting hurt, even if they're getting rescued. I don't care. I don't want to see
Yeah.
any hurt animals, and I don't want to see any people getting hurt really, unless it's a little bit hurt for a lot of shit. It's like, wow, he escaped this big thing with just cuts and bruises. Okay, fine, those cuts and bruises are fine.
With what of your functions would you describe that? Is that like your FI or FE or something?
Yeah, it's FI. It's my baby FI, which says I believe in an imaginary world in which bad things don't happen, and I don't like it when other people, you know, cross the borders of that by
Oh,
showing me actual reality that I don't like.
because I was also wondering about, because it's kind of mirrored in our stacks, right?
Hmm.
Like at least like the second and third and fifth and sixth, no, six and seven. That for me, where I get really triggered is, mm, and maybe that relates to FE, like when something is unfair, like a tragedy that shouldn't have happened. Because I don't mind when people get hurt. I'm like, well, shit happens, but when it's about like, oh, it could have been prevented, then I get angry. Then I'm like, well, fuck that.
Okay, so it's interesting you call that unfair and in the first instance, and then could have been prevented
Hmm.
as the second, are totally different things. The first instance, you're using your critical parent there to criticize other people's bad TI.
Ah,
So,
okay.
which I do with TE too. It's like I criticize other people's bad TE, even though I'm not very good at it myself.
Criticizing, criticizing TI would be unfairness or what?
Yeah, you're saying those people are being unfair. How shitty of them is
Ah, okay.
is uh, is critical parent quote unquote TI. Um,
Hmm.
then the thing you say it could have been prevented is shifting back into your natural TE frame, which in which it's like
Oh,
even
okay.
though so what just happened there is like you criticized their TI and then you interpreted it as a subset of TE.
So it doesn't have anything to do with FIFE. That's funny.
Well, I mean the thing is, preventability doesn't have anything to do with fairness.
Yeah, in general. True.
So that's where I was saying you're going
Yeah.
six then two. Six
That makes, yeah,
to judge and then two to use to do your thing, you know.
that makes so much sense because like obviously effectiveness is like a big thing for me. So that's why I get angry when like humans are ineffective. I actually also like alluded to that in the first conversation we had, but I didn't really explain it right. Um, like effectiveness for me is also like being a good human. I mean, I talked about that in the first video with something. I don't know what your question was again, but um, and sometimes then I get confused with like FE. I think that's FE, but it's actually just TE. I just want like things to work effectively.
Yeah.
So then maybe things are like happier.
Well, people think there are three perspectives: subject, object, observer. The thing is, when we're talking about the world, we're talking as observers. We're being subjects and talking to each other, but we're talking as though we're observers, as though the world is this third party that it encompasses everything that's not us, and we're making observations about how things are in the world. So we're basically doing observer stuff when we're having this kind of conversation when we're talking about the world, and then when you're talking about yourself, you're being a subject and an object concurrently, and I'm being the observer, right? So when we're talking about functions, then it's always important to distinguish how they play out as you perceive them in the world and how they play out in as you perceive them as expressions of yourself.
Hmm.
Probably a little bit too abstract there.
No, I actually got that. I was just like, is that your whole point?
Okay, that's my whole point. Yeah, that's my whole point. It may not seem like a big point, but it actually is because people talk about
Yeah.
functions all the time as objects of analysis, as though they exist outside of individuals, and I get that we need to be able to do that. And then but then they talk about how they play out in the world as though there weren't individuals doing them. And then ultimately the point is a function only ever manifests by an individual's attention, even though we can talk about it as an object of analysis. If we forget that we have to draw these distinctions between things that we're observing versus how they actually play out as subjects, which is the only way they actually play out, then that's where we get confused about things.
Yeah, I guess also that's where like this like distorted perception comes from, where I thought I'm like a completely different type. Because even though I behave the same way as I did before, now I kind of have like a better understanding of what actually I am doing, like what kind of functions describe that.
So do you think that I told you ISTJ that you found that the examples that you have available to you are better matched up with that than ENFP?
Yeah, like my process was like I always believed I was an ENFP, so am I actually like behaving contradictory to what I actually want to do? But then I just realized I behave completely the same way. I just had a wrong frame for how I describe those behaviors because obviously I cannot really observe them how they actually are. I just see how I engage with the world and what I want that to be in the sense.
Well, and that's you just self-described NI8 because
And all the
it's our most unconscious function. And you can do that thing you said you can't really do, but you can't.
way-
You can't consciously, just like I can't consciously SE. I can't tell you what I'm going to do. I cannot tell you what I'm going to do later and then actually do it. If it's up to me, if I have control over my own time, if there's nothing on the schedule. I mean, my calendar is obviously the boss of me, so if it's on the calendar, I got to go do it.
Can you rephrase for the NI? I kind of like that went over my head. Like I don't do it consciously. I
Okay.
cannot.
Yeah,
That I understand.
it's like NI people are better at observing their own behaviors as
Mm.
objects independent of themselves.
So it's about like NI DOMs would be my accurate about things, I guess.
Yeah, about things in the well. I mean, the thing is, they're gonna know, whereas
Mhm.
I'm gonna speculate, and because they know, they have a lot fewer things to say about whatever because
Mhm.
they're they're they have to have available to their observation sufficient amount of information about the thing to know whatever it is they
Mhm.
know about it. So when an INFJ or an INTJ tells you they know something, and you say, you don't know that, it could be meow, 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 you're going to win the point, and you're probably going to be wrong.
Yeah.
Because they do know it, and it's just because I'm not a knower that, from my perspective, I would say, you don't know that. Because, and I come up with all the other possible things that it could be, right? But the
Mm.
fact is, they didn't know it because they're knowers, and I was wrong, probably. Or I might have been right, because sometimes you know wrongly. Like,
That's actually funny. That's why I always go to like I go to my brother for that. And he always like when it comes to like things happening in our environment and we both are experiencing them, he knows something and I only understand it like half a year later and he's like, well, it took you long enough because I need to like, I don't know, actually experience all of it. So for me it's like in hindsight, I'm like, well actually you had a point.
but remember, you're just as better a knower than he in this other area, which is, did I leave the gate open? I had this happen the other day.
Yeah.
I drove away, and came back, and the gate was open, and I usually close the gate, and so I tried to remember walking from meow meow
Just
meow, but that there was a blank in that spot. I just couldn't. I didn't have any memory of either closing the gate or of not closing the gate. Like I didn't pay any attention to the gate when I left, so I didn't
hmm.
notice whether I closed it or not. I could have been on autopilot and closed it, or I could have not. So I couldn't see in my memory whether, in fact, I left the gate. So I walked around and said, "Are there any burglars here?" There weren't any burglars. I probably just left the gate open. But that's where I'm not reliable in knowing whether I left the gate open or not. You're much more reliable in knowing that than your brother is.
Then I'm also like curious, because maybe you experienced that the same way, even though this is like maybe an example you haven't thought of before. Doing martial arts, what you do is an instructor shows you a technique, and then you try to like just copy them. And for me, that is so easy because in my mind it's like, okay, that arm goes there. I just know the movements, and it's so natural to me. And then I've actually noticed another girl in the gym, which she has some similarities to INFJs. I don't know if she is one, but she doesn't get those like movements. She can't remember them. She's like, what the fuck is going on? I don't understand this like sequence. Is that like a SI
That's
thing?
probably you. I wouldn't expect that to be the case from
Hmm.
an INFJ. I would expect that more to be the case from an SE polar person, because the if a person's SE polar or maybe SE eighth, then because like SISE is muscle memory as well. So uh, if if somebody is trying to show me dance moves or martial arts moves, uh, I'll get confused. Like I remember, I did this video called "Dancing Party Dance" where I made up a dance and I had to do it, and it was very hard. You can see me trying to remember the things as I'm going through it, even though the words of the song tell you what to do. I'm still
Yeah.
struggling to remember the moves as I'm going through it because I just don't. That's not the kind of data I use my weak SI to collect. I have a little limited amount of SI to collect data, and that's high resolution data for me. It's like actually physical things. Like if you try to teach me a dance, it's going to be very sloppy at first, and I'm not even going to get that I'm being sloppy and I'm doing a terrible job because I'm not used to being precise about those kind of things.
Mm. That's interesting that you used the word precise. Yeah.
Yeah, I that's one of the things that if I am going to get to be precise about it, I have to first NI it. Like, okay, I get it. This isn't this isn't like walking around or some other thing that I do with my body. This is like art. It's got to be like precise because this is what it's doing artistically. Then I start going, okay, I guess I gotta. But then I think, why am I the one dancing? Can't we get a dancer to do this?
Just someone else.
Yeah, why am I here doing martial arts? Can't we get some fighty guy to do this? I'll stay over here. You guys fight and dance.
You done.
Okay. Anything else? Any last thoughts, questions, comments, concerns, complaints, queries, quandaries, conundrums?
So many options. I actually have one last concern.
Uh huh.
Again, this is with like people that I know. I don't know 100% what kind of type they are, but my brother and I are assuming that like I think ISFJ and I think ESFJ. Yeah. Let me see. I have like a list here. One second. Mm. Yeah, ISFJ and ESFJ. And that was also one reason why I thought I'm an ENFP because I don't relate to them at all. And I'm wondering if, because in my mind I was like, well, now if I am an ISTJ, all of a sudden
It makes
I should
perfect
relate.
sense. No, it makes perfect sense you don't relate to them because you're FE polar and they're FE first or second slot. Even though you're both
But
SI types, you could find some commonality if you have history together. You could talk about that time you went to Mia together. But beyond
yeah.
that, there's nothing. There's nothing. You guys keep talking past each other because
Mm.
you know, ESFJ is NI polar and FE dom. So
Mm.
it's like to you they're gonna constantly be still missing the point, but you're not really gonna consciously get that that's the point that you're feeling until after a while. And then with ISFJ, you're gonna just think, you guys, constantly be using the tool function against each other's polars. So it's like your operational values conflict. It's like me and ENFPs are not don't we don't we don't get along well because I think they're doing me wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. What also makes sense is that SI, I like,
It really depends on your history with them. That's the thing about SI. It's like if you have history with them and habits of how you've already habitually gotten along in the past. Like, well, I know what I do with Mia. Like, I watch football with my dad or something like that. Certain things that we can do together that we have always done together, and that aren't new things.
what is actually funny is that with the ISTJ, I had one conversation a few years ago where we tried to figure out how we could improve our relationship, and I just said maybe we should stop talking and just start doing stuff, because when we talk, we don't relate. And we just fight about, like, I guess there's not a lot of understanding of how we actually view the world, but we're good with, like, talking about, like, people and experiences and stuff like that.
Well, even if you were to work on a project together, you'd be best served to attend to areas that didn't really overlap that much, so you wouldn't really be working together that much.
Yeah, very true. Yeah. But how is it like for ISTPs? Because I have like one of my best friends. I'm pretty sure she's an ISTP. I find it very funny because she's very emotionally stunted. And I mean, for me, like emotions are very selfish, but it's so funny to see her just like trying to use TI for everything.
I think ISTPs are the most emotionally stunted types of all, personally.
Which is very entertaining because they're not mean about it. There's like other types I
No,
feel like are more.
it's like you think I'm a baby. ISTPs are even more huge babies than me. They're the hugest babies of all. Just because they're all TI about it all the time. They've got shitty as hell a 4-slot FE that's just like, okay, oh god.
Yeah.
It's so much more grating than 4th slot FE and the INTP, from whom it's just like, okay, can you get to your fucking point already?
Oh, yeah.
And then, but if as soon as ISTP if doesn't get what they, isn't able to do what they want or expect to happen or something, or they aren't able to have clarity about what they can't get their single way to go, they get very petulant.
Yeah. So yeah, I could see that. I could see that. I guess that's why that's why I started realizing I couldn't be an NFP once I tried to actually type my friends, just by functions, not by like the whole thing. But I was like, my friends use too much TI and TE. This is questionable. Because do you think ENFPs and ISTPs would relate as like friends? Because for me that would surprise me.
ENFPs and ISTPs?
Yeah. I feel like I'm quizzing you.
I've never thought about that before. I've never thought about that pairing before.
Yeah.
I don't see. This is the thing is I don't really like to explain things I haven't thought about before unless I have a good instinct about what to say about it. I'm not sure what to say about that. ENFP and ISTP.
That's amusing. You don't have to like try to get something together. That's fine.
Yeah, maybe I'll think about it later, but I'm not sure what to say. I have no opinion at the moment about how well ENFP and ISTP should get along.
And how is it for ISTJ and ISTP then?
What are the two types again? Say it again.
ISTJ, ISTP.
Oh. You guys aren't going to like each other.
That's your opinion.
Yeah.
Based on.
Well, because they're TI DOMs, you're 6-slot TI. You're an SI Dom, they're 6th slot SI. Then you do validate on each other's 5th slot, I guess, TE and SE, but NI third is selfish, and that's going to get in the way of your autopilot but very unconscious 8th slot NI. And same with your FI, and that's why you see them as emotionally stunted, because your selfish FI but conscious interferes with their unconscious autopilot FI in ways that make them act out. And because yours is selfish, you think, and conscious, it operates as though they have to have at least some level of competency with it consciously, which they don't have. It projects that like burden onto them. So, and
I mean,
the same for them with their NI and your NI.
Because I also like with her, like we don't relate on anything except for like doing stuff. So I guess that's like SESI. We
Yeah,
just do stuff.
yeah.
It's very, yeah, it's not like contemplating and finding similarities.
If you were to ask them, I guess they'd say, we only relate when we're figuring out how to solve a problem or something.
No,
And
yeah,
and you might be talking about the same experience, but through a different frame.
very true.
Each saying the other validates on your 5th slot function.
I know that like in another video, you mentioned that typing sessions aren't really like your favorite thing to do. Like it's okay, but you prefer doing other things. But in typing sessions, is there like anything that you enjoy? Like any, I don't know, part of it?
I like typing sessions. I like I well, it depends on the individual session as to how much I like it. The thing is, there are a fair number of sessions still there where people don't choose not to publish, and for those, that's part of why I I have this kind of mixed feelings about it, is because I don't know whether they're going to publish until the end usually, and so I don't feel like I know, because they may at any point decide they talked about something that they don't want to talk about publicly, and say I don't want to publish, or they may have already decided in the first place they don't want to publish. It doesn't matter. I don't ask them ahead of time usually. I ask them at the end. So because of that, if it's not published, it feels like that time was just work. It was just I did it for money. If it is published, then it feels like it was time well spent if it was a good conversation or informative about typology or something.
Mm.
And if it was like a boring one that just validates the existing stuff, that's still good because it validates the existing stuff, but it's not going to be fun to watch. So like half good. If it's all
I feel like
good,
those sessions are the ones where like when you ask someone like how many did you watch, they're like, well, I like watched the first 10 minutes. Because I watched many, also like the whole thing, and sometimes it's like the conversation is very engaging, and sometimes it's really like an interview, just like the functions, and then at the end it's like, here you go.
well, yeah, I mean
Type.
it's and that depends a lot on where extroverted intuition is in the other person's stack, because the ones I think that are dull are ISFPs, or the dullest of all the typing sessions, because they don't really have a lot to say in response to the questions. And so it's more me just asking questions, them giving quick answers, me asking the next question, them giving a quick answer. Those ones are, I think, boring to watch. And I think they're boring for me because I'm I'm not getting a lot of we're not playing with each other very much, you know.
Mm. No, yeah, it's not that playful. Yeah, for sure. Hmm.
I
That
enjoyed
is
this
new.
conversation, though. I think this was a good conversation. I think people are going to enjoy this video. I think it's going to be actually. I think this time was very well spent because you asked me good questions and engaged me in good ways that evoked explanations about some things that I've been thinking about and linked to things I've been thinking about. And I think, you know, this is an informative video. I feel like I got a lot of sleep last night, and so I needed it.
Like, I'm glad because I didn't go into this conversation with like any questions that I actually wanted to ask. So I'm glad it actually turned to like a good conversation.
Me too. Okay, so I'm going to stop recording now. You're comfortable with me publishing?
Yeah, and I also wanted to ask you if you could put like Mind of a Girl, my name in it, in the title.
Mind of a Girl. Okay, yeah. Oh, sure. Oh, yeah. That's your handle on YouTube, huh?
Exactly, yeah.
All right, cool. Will do.